name is Lori Power. I am a national group benefit consultant. And every week I try to have conversations with people or experts in their field so that we can grow and learn towards success. What attracts me most is how to plan a benefit program that aligns the cultural values with the employee needs in order to create a strategic compensation program. I have been so fortunate to get to know Sunjay, and he was in a few months ago, and we talked about his patented, copywritten, trademarked 10-80-10, which he's got a couple of books. If you haven't been on his website to see his books, I strongly and highly recommend. They're easy reads, but they're excellent reads. And I find myself, before we get into it, I find myself absolutely obsessed now with the 10-80-10. And every day it does play a part in my mind. But can you take a moment to introduce yourself and how you started?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sunjay, and I've been a professional speaker in the sort of leadership, professional development, motivation, self-help kind of world for about 27 and a half years. And what the story goes like this. Every time I read something or watched something or learned something, I found that certain themes kept on coming up time and time again. And there were generic things like, trust and communication and focusing on your strength and et cetera, et cetera. And so I actually did it. I wrote them down, and literally hundreds of these snippets that I'd come across, and I kept finding it. Basically, it was about a dozen or so ideas that just kept on coming up time and time again. And so when I was trying to make a name for myself, and I was trying to figure out how can I best serve people and create value, I kind of went to that list and said, how do I amalgamate and mush these together as best I can from what I'm hearing, so that I don't want to have to go do research for years and years, but I want it to have an intuitive appeal and kind of stand on the shoulders of giants. And came up with this notion, this idea called the 10-80-10 principle, which said in its simplest form is about focusing on your strengths. That's really what it comes down to. So I went and I've trademarked it and all that stuff, but really, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a professional re-reminderer, right? I tell people stuff they already know, but I hopefully try to say it in a way that it has a high stickiness factor, so that people actually hear an idea or a concept and go, oh, I can do that. And then they actually go do it. And then here's the real brilliance is they tap into their own inner genius or the team's inner genius, and they actually execute, they get the results, and they go, this stuff works. But yeah, it works because you're working. So that, I mean, that's what it is. That's the story of how it came to be. Do you want me to define and go through it? What's helpful?
What's helpful, I think, because there's a few people that hadn't been in here before to hear it. I really, what made it very obvious for me, that blinding flash of obvious, was when you talked about walking up on the stage and you talked about who are you going to concentrate on when you're giving a presentation. That really cemented it home. Do you mind sharing
Absolutely.
that
So
example?
yeah, so high level is basically you take any group, you can subdivide them into three groups: top 10%, bottom 10%, majority 80%. Top 10 has to be there. Sorry, try that again. Top 10 wants to be there, bottom 10 has to be there, and the majority 80 is going to follow whichever group is more empowered. Whichever group has more social influence and accolades will shift up the majority 80 or shift them down. So if you're part of an organization where the top 10 is revered, people kind of follow them going, we want to do that. On the flip side, if the bottom 10 are revered, then you kind of have a lifeless organization. I call them dynamic and static. So a couple of quick examples. One I like to illustrate very simply is if you've ever gone to a musical and ended up giving a standing ovation, or any sort of live theater performance, ended up giving a standing ovation to something you really didn't feel deserved a standing ovation. And there's the 10-80-10 at play, because what happens is you happen to be sitting next to the lead role's mother. And in my language, she's the top 10. So the play finishes, she's on her feet, she's yelling and screaming, hooting and hollering and throwing roses. And out of social convention and, kind of conformity, you're kind of like, don't want to be rude, so you stand up and you're clapping too. So in that scenario, you're a majority 80 and you were influenced by the top 10, right? On the flip side, have you ever been to a presentation that is so excruciatingly boring? The delivery sucks, the content sucks, you're ready to scratch your eyes out, And you look around and everyone's involved in either a side conversation or they pulled out their phone. And the next thing you know, you've pulled out your phone too and you're checking your email. And so what did you do? There's an example of the bottom 10 getting empowered, right? And you kind of find yourself in that way. So as a professional speaker, I've been in front of over 2,000 live audiences. And you may find this hard to believe, but sometimes as a professional speaker, I'm in front of audience members and not everyone in the audience wants to be there. I know it's surprising. I'm sure I'm the only person in the history of the world that's ever happened to. And what's the rookie mistake? The rookie mistake is we see that one guy in the back corner of the room going, oh, I see you, not paying attention. And you're like, I will win you over. My friend, you and I will be skipping off in the educational sunset singing Who My Frickin' Ya. And we try to win them over and we send them love and energy. And what you're actually doing is what I call the triple whammy. 3 whammies. Whammy number 1, that person's behavior hasn't changed. Right? When you concentrate on the bottom 10, you very, very rarely do you ever make any movement. So that's one whammy. Whammy number 2, I get demotivated. Right? All this time and energy I'm setting in the love and whatever. I go home at the end of the day and I go, oh, what an exhausting day. So that's whammy number 2. And whammy number 3, here's the most powerful one, is the question is, how does everyone else around that person feel? And the answer is ignored. You see, all the time and energy you're trying to convert that person, you're actually ignoring all the other people around them, right? So what do you want to do is you want to focus on the top 10. Well, how do you know who the top 10 are? An example I often use when I'm presenting, I say, do you know who the top 10 people around you are? And some people say yes, some people say no. So I say, okay, think of a group of people that you interact with on a regular basis. Social, professional, personal, I don't care, just people you know well. And if I said in that group of people, can you answer this question? Who are the top 10 when it comes to being social? And almost always in the audience, I see people doing this. And I say, okay, great. And if I said, who are the bottom 10 when it comes to being punctual? Can you answer that? And I see a few smirks and people going, yeah, Billy's always like, right? And then my follow-up punchline is, without pointing, how many people can answer this question? Who are the bottom 10 when it comes to showering? And again, we get a bit of a giggle and people pointing and laughing. But the point I'm trying to make is people don't wear signs, but it's pretty darn close. People are flagging themselves. So as a presenter, if I'm looking at my audience, I know who my top 10 and who my bottom 10 are. Their body language tells it all. My top 10, they're leaning forward, they're smiling, they're nodding, they're taking notes. And I tell and I want to involve them. One of the things the speaker will try to do to involve an audience is you tell a joke. And the number one reason why an audience laughs, it's not when you're funny. It's actually hearing other people laugh. This again is an example of 10-80-10 at play, right? The top 10 start laughing, the majority of you start laughing too. Ha ha ha. You're telling a joke. What is it? Right? So if I want to engage an audience and I choose to tell a joke, am I telling it to the bottom 10? No, that's a triple whammy approach. He or she doesn't even know I'm telling the joke. I tell it to the top 10. Do I know who my top 10 people are? Of course I do. Remember, they flag themselves. They're smiling, nodding, leaning forward, taking notes. I tell them a joke. Do they laugh? They do way better than laugh. They guffaw. They chortle. They lose their mind. They slap their knees and they point and go, oh, he's one funny dude. They start laughing. Then the majority 80 starts laughing. Once you have that critical mass, which is your top 10 plus your majority 80, the bottom 10 does something that I think is actually quite remarkable, but they break up into 2 groups. One group runs after everyone going, wait for me, I want to laugh. And the other goes, I'm trying to send an email, and they leave. In either way, it's a desired result. So that's kind of what it is at the highest level. And then, you can apply it to culture, you can apply it to sales, you can apply it to family dynamics. So
I looked really smart once I first was introduced to it. I was seeing a client and we were talking about turnover, and we were talking about the impact of turnover on how it impacts their salary, how it impacts the expense to the company, a lot of those things. And the owner was so enlightened in my position or in my perspective, because he called them pillars. And he said, within each level of our organization, no matter which office we're dealing with, I have pillars. Sometimes it's the receptionist. Sometimes it's the high-level team leader that should be the pillar. He said, but I know who is a pillar in every category and every office. So I always make sure that they're going to be there. He said, because if I lose them, chances are there's going to be a couple of things. One, the rest of the team is going to be demotivated. Or I'm going to lose a portion of the team that go, oh, they left, why should I stay? So that was his focus, and I was able to engage in quite a conversation. So I said, well, that sounds like the 10-80-10 rule. And he said, well, what's that? And I, so again, you've made me look good. I'm selfish.
Perfect. Well, I
And
want a nickel for every time you say 10-80-10. That's my residuals. It's got to come this way. If I could actually piggyback on what you're doing up front and the question you're asking about people to identify their top 10 and bottom 10, and even using the example that you just brought forward, which is top 10 and bottom 10 it's a very relative scale, right? And in fact, what's top 10 in one scenario will be bottom 10 in another. So when I articulate this and go through the big, the whole salami kind of thing, I say to implement it, it always starts from having the desired result. What is the outcome? What is the goal? What is the end in mind? What is your vision? What is your mission? What is it you're trying to achieve? Because if this swaps, the top 10 and bottom 10 can swap very quickly. And it has nothing to do with who they are. It has to do with what your criteria is. So I'll give you an example. I was speaking one time and a guy kind of challenged my position. And he said, hold on a second, wait a minute. This whole 10-80-10 thing, it sounds like you're like talking about focusing on your strengths. And I said, absolutely, that's a huge part of it. And he said, so you're telling me if I'm coaching a bunch of 4-year-olds for soccer, I should only play my best players. And I said, hold on a second, time out, because what's the desired result? Because if the desired result is to win the game, then yes, you play your best players. But I'm going to make the argument that when you're coaching 4-year-old soccer, it's not about winning. It's about player development. It's about athleticism. It's about communication and good sportsmanship. And so that kid that tries the hardest, that shows up, that has the best attitude, you play him or her the most because they are your top 10 relative to that desired result. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in front of a C-suite and they assume that everyone's on the same page for the desired result. And that messes things up a lot. Because if you go around and one says, oh, well, the desired result is about bottom line profit. Great. The bottom line is about environmental sustainability. Great. The bottom line is about organizational culture. Wonderful. There's nothing wrong with any of those. But it becomes a problem if everyone assumes they're on the same page. And if I said, if it's about environmental sustainability, who's your top 10 employee? They're going to have a very different answer, usually, than if I say to, oh, it's about sales, who's your top 10 employee? So when you go back to your organization, you're mentioning, and he's talking about his pillars. These are pillars based on a certain metric. And so you need to be crystal clear on what that metric is, because if I said a devil's advocate, okay, we're doing our organization, this group here on the call, we're doing a brainstorming exercise. And if Natasha is a notorious devil's advocate.
Oh, she is.
Yeah, totally, I know. If Natasha's a devil's advocate, in a brainstorming exercise, we want to throttle her about the neck because she's frustrating and annoying. She's shooting everything down. Well, what if aliens come down and abduct people? And she's got these crazy ideas, and it's annoying and frustrating given that circumstance. However, if a day later we're doing a new exercise and it's a safety exercise, and we need every possible contingency, and Natasha's going, well, what happens if aliens come down and abduct us? We go, oh, that's brilliant. So she just went from being from a bottom 10 to a top 10 without changing anything about who she is, but my desired result has changed. So to go and say someone is top 10 or bottom 10 is not a fair statement. They're top 10 or bottom 10 relative to a certain dimension you're measuring at that particular time, which sounds like a mouthful.
And decisions without data is shooting in the dark, right? So you're absolutely right. You have to define the metrics. I was in a conference a few years ago, and we were talking about employee engagement and who do you keep and who do you ask to find their happiness elsewhere? Because apparently you're the round peg and we're looking for square for this particular criteria. And there was a bit of an outrage in the room because they were like, there's nothing wrong with asking somebody to find happiness elsewhere, that this organization is not going to do it. Because the teaching was, stop focusing on people that you have to try to bring up the bell curve and focus on who's already on the bell curve.
Because here's the thing is, you don't know why they're not up there. It could be family reasons, mental reasons, physical, it doesn't matter. The point is, if they're not ready, you can yell at them till you're blue in the face and it's going to be very little impact. Whereas the people that are ready to rock, it's help those who want to help themselves. So yeah, I mean, that's the core of kind of everything I do, which is around this 10-80-10 concept. So.
I have to say, I went into my son's production of Bubble Boy, and I was the mom. I stood right up and I thought about this, and I'm like, I'm giving this standing ovation, and honest to God, everybody stood up right around me because they couldn't not. Right. Like they weren't two things. They weren't willing to let me be a fool by myself, which is fine. But they would also have felt stupid because this is a student production. How are we not going to encourage them? For your organizations, let's make it a question and answer, right? Like, let's pick Sunjay's mind on, so we get better clarity on, let's focus on that 10% of clarity. This usually there's crickets.
I'll throw you a question. You probably heard the expression before of hire slow, fire fast, even though often the opposite happens. But just your reaction to that. Again, I realize there's high levels of subjectivity to the scenario, but just your comments.
Yeah, first of all, I'm a huge advocate of hire slow, fire fast. Big time. I think that's what you want to be doing. The other thing too, around this, tying into the 10-80-10, is people are not bottom 10 because they're Darth Vaders in the morning, twisting their evil mustache going, oh, how do I bottom 10 today? People are bottom 10 more often than not because they're misfits. And just simply replacing the person, giving them a different position, or whether it's within the organization or an external organization, often can make them go from being a dud to a superstar. I was doing some work with a country club in the States, and talking to the general manager, and we were talking this whole 10-80-10. He'd see me do it somewhere. He brought me to speak to his staff. So he was a convert. But what I thought was the way he executed was very cool. He said one of the things he did, and we made up a word, so I'm going to share with you the word. One of the things he did is, and whenever he hired someone, and it was a small enough club that he did all the hiring personally. He said within, I can't remember what the number was, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it was. He said he found whoever was a new employee, he did a little check-in with them. And part of the criteria he would ask is, he would say, what's your favorite part of your job? What do you like most? What do you like least? And what he was trying to do is assess the fit. And so this one kid he one time brought in, he was a server. And so he talked to the guy and he was like, what do you love most about your job? And he's like, oh man, I love getting the orders right. When they say hold the pickles, and he was just really excited about just punching that order in. It's just getting it right. It's lining it up. And he goes, that's fantastic. He goes, so what do you like least about your job? And he goes, well, I don't really like the customers. And so he's kind of going, okay, maybe having you as a server is not the best position. And so he kind of talked to him more, and he got him in a job in sort of a controlling, like as a controller with accountability and accounting and number crunching. And so I kind of joked to him and I said, is that a promotion or a demotion? And we kind of thought about it. And this is the term we made up. We call it a fit motion. Because it's not about being better or worse. It's about, does it fit who you are, what you bring to the table? And so this idea of hiring and firing has to do with lining up the top 10 strengths of the individual to the needs of the organization. And when you have that meshed together, then you don't have to worry about firing because it jives. When it's not, then yeah, you want to, I think it's an unfair ask to ask an employee to be something authentically they are not. And they might be able to do it. But the problem is it's not sustainable, because after 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years, they burn out and they leave. So if they want to fundamentally change and they're looking to do that, it's one thing. But what often happens is people agree to say, I want the position, I'll do it. Or they're intimidated into it. If you want this job, you will do it this way. And the problem with both those approaches is the lack of sustainability. I don't know if I answered your question or I rambled like a politician, but in Ontario, it is election day. So, I'm in the spirit of.
There you go. That was great. Thanks, Eddie.
One of the things before I open it to Natasha's is, somebody had said to me as well, is if we're hanging on to employees that aren't a fit based on the criteria of what we ask them to do, you're not only not doing a disservice, you are doing a disservice to your own organization, but you're fundamentally holding that person back from being the best person they can be with somebody else, because they may go on to work for whomever XYZ company. Like you said, this young person being a better numbers cruncher, that might have opened up a whole avenue and a career into accounting that they had never even thought that they were suited for. So, it's about doing a favor to those people and having those conversations. Natasha, do you want to go in? You said about the finding the bottom 10% are typically unhappy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's in my experience. I found that the bottom 10s are typically unhappy in their personal lives. They have either underlying, relationship issues, or maybe mental health issues, or just general physical health issues. And so I find that there are things that, because for us, we really try and be proactive and make sure we're building up our employees' professional and personal lives. But sometimes there's just some people that just, yeah, I mean, and every organization has them, like even our organization. I mean, we have a 92% satisfaction rate, and I have bottom 10s, right? And try as I might, there is nothing I can do to make them happy people. They show up as misfits, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Sanjay.
I was going to say there's spillover. When people are miserable in one area of their life, their chances are they're miserable in another.
Yeah, misery loves company, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And like you said, that there's always a bottom 10. What you want to do is kind of raise the bar. Like even the all-star team has its weakest players.
Yeah.
So even if you have bottom 10%, but if as an organization you slowly creep up over time, and what was the bottom 10% 10 years ago is now a majority 80, that's progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the other question I had to put in there. So, I strongly believe in what you said, like building up that, your top 10s, right? So they influence that 80% more or increase the 80%. So what are your top tips for building up the top 10s more?
So if I was doing a program, the language I use is, if you want to, implement the 10-80-10, you have to ACT, ACT, because every speaker needs an acronym. So mine is ACT. A stands for awareness, C is choice, T is time. Awareness, choice, time. Awareness, what do you got to be aware of? 3 things. And the first one's by far the most important. First one is, what is the desired result? We talked about that. What is the outcome? What is the goal, right? Then number 2 is, who are the top 10? What it means is, who are the people who are currently exhibiting top 10 behaviors that are supporting whatever this mission is? So, and again, you have to understand that just because you're not a top 10 doesn't mean you can't support the organization. Not everyone can be a top 10.
No.
And I'll give you an example of that. Should I do the third point, which is, who are the bottom 10, which means who are the people exhibiting behaviors that are pulling us away? And again, it doesn't mean they're bad people. It's not an assessment of their character. It's simply looking at the action. So for example, if I was hosting a dinner party, okay, I am not a cook, but I can still be the host, and I can be a good host. But I am a bottom 10 when it comes to cooking. That doesn't mean I can't set the table or do the dishes or make the nice invites or play the music. I can still offer to the group, but when it comes to cooking, I'm a bottom 10.
Yeah.
So if people can own that, that becomes really helpful. But so then the criteria works like this: is then, so the A is awareness. What do I want? Who's my top 10? Who's my bottom 10? Got it. C, choice. Choice, you're going to do 2 things. You're going to make a choice to neutralize the bottom 10 and empower the top 10. I'm using very specific words. I want to explain what I mean by them. When you neutralize something, you spend the minimal amount of time, energy, attention, thought, so it no longer draws resources.
Yeah.
So exactly what you're saying, Natasha, you have a 92% score, but there are still people who are miserable. It is not your job, and it's not an efficient use of resources to try to fix them. They are not ready to be fixed. They want to pout. Some people, that is their identity. They want to bitch and complain. Great.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you try to go, hey, smile, hey, here, put on this clown nose, or whatever you're trying to do, it just annoys them more and it wastes your time. So you want to neutralize minimal amount of energy, and often the best way to neutralize is just simply ignore.
Yeah, because they are typically the biggest time suckers, right?
Not only time, but money, resource. We send them to Fix-It Camp. We send them for training and stuff. It's a complete waste of money. It's a complete waste of time. It's a complete waste of resources. But what you want to do is go over to the top 10 and you want to empower them. Well, that was your question. How do you empower them?
Yeah.
time, energy, attention, thought, and resources.
Yeah.
We train them more. We give them a voice. We make them vocal. When I was in high school, I was very involved with the student council. I was student council president one year, and our main source of income for high school was high school dances. And our dances absolutely sucked. No one wanted to go to the dances. And I'm showing my age here, but when I started high school, you were still allowed to smoke at the dances in the school.
Yeah.
And so they cut, they stopped you from being able to smoke partway through, like when I was in grade 10 or something. And that's when dances just went. We had a dance one year where 7 people showed up. We had a school of 1,000 people, 7 people came to the dance. Anyways, fast forward, I was trying to be clever and figure out a way in which I could get more people to come to the dance. And what we did was, this kind of goes to the pillar idea, we're having a semi-formal dance. And I went on the announcements and I said, ladies and gentlemen, we're having a random draw where we're going to draw 4 tickets to the semi-formal dance. And so what I'd done with the student council beforehand is we said, who are 4 influential people in different social groups, the sporties, the academics, the artsies, and who are single, who are in a relationship and then have some sort of social clout. So in their circles, I didn't use the language back then, but they were top 10. So the rationale was I'd randomly draw their names. They would have to bring their significant other, right? And then all of a sudden, ooh, the top 10, they're empowered. And then people would go, well, Billy's going, I'm going. So there's an example of what was I giving them? I was giving them attention. I was giving them time, giving them a platform. There's different ways of doing it. There's going back to my scoot example. So what was that example? Well, that was an example of money transformed into a gift. Now, can I have done it better? Yeah, I could have done it on steroids. I could have presented it in front of the staff, right? So giving recognition. I don't think it would have been appropriate in my particular case, but there's an example of how you empower. Awards, recognition, plaques, all these things, assuming it's what the person wants.
Yeah.
There's an underlying assumption. Because some people, they go, oh, we'll give them public recognition. And there are people that would rather eat their own spleen to get public recognition. So, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So it has to be something that is perceived as value, not only valuable to you because you say it's valuable. But those are the big 5 words I use: is time, energy, attention, thought, or resources.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's fantastic. That's, all the stuff that we do. And it's interesting what you were saying about, not everyone, can be in the top 10, right? And it's funny because I talk to my managers when we're coaching them and doing performance developments a lot, about how, they say, oh, well, they don't really have a lot of, like goals. They don't want to move into management or, and I'm like, that's great. If they're happy and content being where they are, that's what we need. If everyone wanted to be like us, like you and me, the world would just be one rat race. Like, you don't want your employees to be managers. They're going to take your job, right? So,
if every parent had their dream and their kid became a doctor, we'd have way too many doctors.
Yes.
And with more ailments.
Yeah.
I can link what you've said, it because it has made such a tremendous impact on my approach to a benefit program. And we've talked about this as well, Sunjay, is I'll use the example of, because I love the way you said about choice. So we have a situation where the employer offers both the health spending account and the personal spending account in how they utilize the money. And, I think Janice heard me use this example a couple of weeks ago where they were having a bit of a, oh my gosh, because one of the employees that is in this category, so they're in that top category that has received this extra on their benefit program, but they went out and bought a Costco playset. And the owners are going, oh man, I don't know, what's this going to mean to the other members of the staff? They're going to see how this guy used the money, and it's failing. And I, reeling it back, I'm like, no, this is the guy you want now espousing to everybody how amazing the benefit plan is. I said, you have now protected your company against losing this person to the competition, because the competition's never going to give him that choice, never going to create a smile on his face every time he goes into his backyard and sees his kids playing. The glasses will come and go, and they're a product of being productive in my workplace. But my kids' laughter is a memory that I will cherish forever. And so to you,
And
that
it
goes
goes
to you.
further. It goes further by empowering the top 10 in that example. That gentleman or woman, I don't even know what is going to go to the poker game or the dinner and sit with their colleagues in a different industry going, you wouldn't believe what my benefits are. And they're gonna share that story. And I mean, that's what happens. Is so what's gone on is they've actually developed a recruitment strategy, an unintentional grassroots, really slow recruitment strategy. Like your guys do that, they take care of you. So the next time they are looking for a position or they have a friend looking for a position, well, I had dinner with someone last week who you want me to connect you? And so what's gone on is exactly how the whole 10-80-10 concept works. Is the top 10 gets empowered, the majority 80 starts following. Once you hit that critical mass, that's your top 10 plus your majority 80, the bottom 10 breaks up into two groups. One part goes, wait for me, I want to join. And the other part goes, I'm out of here. And both are a desired result.
And it's strategic, right? It's how we approach these conversations. It's how we can share that messaging and understand what the data actually means.
Yep, absolutely.
Always the fast.
I don't know if there's time, but there's one small aspect of it that I struggled with a little bit. And Sunjay, I listened to your previous presentation, and I think that it helped me there. Struggling with the compassion and support for that bottom 10, right? Like their fate is sealed. If they're at the bottom, they're never gonna get up. But you talked about applying that same concept to your bottom 10. You can take that 10-80-10 rule in that group of people at the bottom. And that helped me a little bit with that part of it.
Well, a couple of things. One is, and I said it earlier in this call, people are not top 10, bottom 10, and majority 80. People exhibit behaviors in a particular dimension that you're measuring that are top 10, bottom 10, and majority 80, which means at any given time in your life, if you're a human, you live in all three.
Yes.
You may be top 10 when it comes to your career. You may be bottom 10 when it comes to exercise. You may be majority 80 when it comes to relationships. You live in all three. And if you constantly judge yourself on your weaknesses or all your bottom 10s against everyone else who's top 10 around you, then you always feel inadequate. So a healthy ego, self-confidence, by the way, just a bit of an aside, one of my favorite quotes, I stole it from a friend of mine and I pretend like I said it, but he says the difference between ego and self-confidence. Self-confidence is believing you can do it. Ego is believing others can't. I think that's brilliant, right? So it's an internal thing. So now I derailed.
We were talking about compassion in the bottom 10.
Compassion. Okay. So this idea that you live in all three, if you have a healthy self-confidence, you appreciate and know that, yeah, you know what? I am bottom 10 in these areas and I own that. And if it's important to me, I will choose to get myself out of bottom 10. However, if it's not part of my identity, I'll let that go because it's not that important to me. However, this top 10 piece here, I'm going to really focus on that. So physical health and working out is really important to me. And I feel like I'm not doing my best, then you will make the effort to do that. And so again, I think because this is a concept that comes up a lot. People go, oh, those people will feel like they're privileged, or other people are going to say it's unfair or whatever. No, it's not. It's not about, it to me comes back to this argument of equality versus fairness. There's a very big difference between equal and being fair, right? So
fair is not equal and equal is not fair.
Again, the way I always like to explain it is if you're playing a game, a card game, and you each get 5 cards. If you're being equal, you each get the same 5 cards. If you're being fair, you get 5 cards from the same deck. And your 5 cards may be better than my 5 cards. And it's up to me to say, okay, well, I want to change the game. So that's the, right, Natasha? That's how, that's the piece. Is it's not our job as a manager, as a peer, as a family member to mandate and make people feel warm and fuzzy. People have to come to the plate. If they say, I need help, we want to support them. We want to help them find that fit. But I don't think it's our job. Maybe as an exception, you can make that argument as a parent. To a certain degree, you have to spoon feed your children. But after a while, when people are mature, competent beings, and I won't put an age because some people are at age 12 and some people aren't quite there at 50, and some of you married them. But by the time we're anyway, so I think it's a give and take. It's not our job to fix and run after people. We have to come back to the relationship together and create a symbiotic relationship.
Yes, and using the word fit, finding the fit, because we can use that in that, introvert extrovert argument. One isn't better than the other, but there's a better fit for different types of roles.
In fact, though, I'm going to exactly what you're saying, go a little deeper. Actually, one is better than the other in the right situation. Sometimes it's the introvert and sometimes it's the extrovert. But to overall say introvert's better, extrovert's better, it's crap. Right? If you give me the context, and sometimes it doesn't matter, and sometimes it matters big time.
Right.
Usually extrovert librarians aren't good.
But it comes down to that alignment and listening to your staff. But we're okay. So Sunjay, there's no choice. I have to invite you back. We have to do this again and take yet another. We're diving into that top 10% and really getting into understanding it. So we're building our 80.
You're the boss. I'm happy to return. If you haven't learned from your mistakes, you want to bring me back, no problem. I just don't remember what I said. So if I repeat, that's not on me.
No, and you have to repeat, right? Because it's the repetitiveness that makes it hit home and allows us to practice it. Because honestly, I'm not blowing smoke here. It has changed the mode of conversation with clients, with team members, to really say, are we concentrating based on this data in the wrong area? It could be even your networking group, right? You want to grow your networking group, but why are you looking at this data when this is what you're telling me you want to grow? So it really is, it's a phenomenal and well-used change of mindset.
Well, thank you. The default is that squeaky wheel, right? For whatever reason, we default to that. And it usually does not serve our purpose. There are probably, one in a bazillion chance, whatever it does. But for the most part, and I'm a math guy, to me, it's about probability. And the probability of the greatest success is, what are we doing that's working really well? How do we do more of that? How do we empower that? What are we doing that's sucking? How do we do less of it? And that's really what it comes down to. And like I said, although I own the trademark, there have been literally thousands of books and magazines and ideas and concepts that have said this in different forms. And like, I just try to mush it together and give some verbiage and vernacular and lexicon around it.
Well, and it makes it easy to remember. That's the other critical element, is the 10-80-10 act is easy for me to keep top of mind, right? I think Janice and Santa can agree. If we can keep it top of mind when we're having our conversations, it does empower everybody around us. Thank you so much. This has been way too fast an afternoon, so we will bring you back, but I appreciate your time always.